So we are going, hopefully, with a win across 1800. Okay, so hopefully we'll get a white game. We've been playing a lot with black recently on the speedrun, so hopefully we can play a white game. Let's play something very aggressive. You know, I feel like playing something aggressive. So let's do something. Let's go e4. Let's go e4 this time. And let's play a Vienna. Let's play a good old-fashioned Vienna gambit with knight c3 and f4. If he goes knight f6, of course. And let's see how the Vienna holds up at this level. Bishop b4. Okay, so this is this move kind of takes the fun out of the position a little bit. It's not a great move. It's sort of like a Trumpowski inverted to the other side of the board. And I think a lot of you guys might be instinctually tempted to go knight d5 here, as you would in like a Trumpowski. But the problem there, I mean, as far as I know, the bishop drops back to c5. And that knight on d5 is not stable. Black can chase it away with c6. So instead of going knight d5, I feel like that's a little bit reactionary. We have a couple of other interesting moves here. And one of those interesting moves is just to play this as if it were a Vienna, just to play f4. Because I don't really see how this bishop on b4 impacts the effectiveness of the move f4. So let's keep the spirit of the Vienna. Let's play f4. Probably not the best move, but I do want to get this kind of structure and see how, you know, an 1800 holds up against it. So e takes f4. Now, a common misconception is that we follow this up with the immediate d4. We do not. We don't want to play d4 here. That's a big mistake in almost all of these positions because it allows this nasty check on h4. So what should we start with? Same with bishop c4. We allow the check on h4. We don't want to do that. We want to start by developing the knight to f3. That is a crucial component of the Vienna. You don't go d4 generally without going knight f3 first to prevent the possibility of queen h4. All right. So now, of course, he can take the knight. Okay, goes h6. Now, I think his intentions are nakedly obvious. He wants to go g5 and build up a pawn chain and basically not allow us to win the pawn back on f4. And, you know, at this level, when you play an opening, it's not enough just to memorize the theory and stuff. You also have to be very, very flexible. You have to adjust your opening strategy based on how your opponent handles the opening himself. So this is a very good example of that. I think, you know, generally speaking, you would go d4 in such a position. You would try to win back this pawn. But here d4 walks right into his plan. d4, g5, and I'm not really sure what we gain, honestly, from controlling the center like this. I don't think we need to play d4. I think we should instead prioritize our immediate minor piece development and try to punish him for not developing his own pieces in the most timely manner. And once I say that, you guys should already be basically aiming at the correct move. Some of you are proposing h4, and as I'll show you after the game, h4 is way too weakening in such positions. Pushing this pawn out like that, it really burns all the bridges. It weakens the g3 square, which actually is very significant. Let's play bishop c4. That's a calm move. And let's see how he arranges his pieces before we decide on anything else. So this move h4, generally these things occur better on the other side of the board. If he would have gone a6, a4 is far less committal. Knight f6 is an excellent move. Okay. So what should we do now? No, I wouldn't say we're clearly better. I'd say the position is complex. Yeah, I like e5. I also like the simple castle short. When in doubt, just develop. There is a small tactical issue with the move d3, and that is that it opens up this pin, and it essentially justifies the placement of the bishop on b4. Now, what nasty little move does d3 allow? And I've just given you a hint by guiding your eyes to the pin. Yeah, black can play d5 and get very nice piece development. E takes d5, knight takes d5. You've seen that a million times. And this knight cannot capture because it's pinned. So if we go e5, black is going to go d5 most probably. That's the very classic technique that exists in such positions. So instead of any of that, we just castle. Let's just, as Hikaru would say, let's just castle. And if he castles, then e5 becomes a much more effective move. Now we go e5. Now what's the difference here? What if he goes d5? Well, the difference is that we're castled. We don't have to worry about king safety anymore, while he does. So what happens if d5? What is the simplest approach there for white? And I still don't think that we're better there. I think it's very complex, but it gets a nice position. We just play... No, we don't play en passant. We take the knight. You know, we take the knight, then we take g7. We ruin his pawn structure permanently, and then we go after this f4 pawn. So he's got a pretty big decision on his hands as to like whether he wants to go for that or to move the knight. I think he should go for that anyway. That seems to be the best that he can do. If he goes knight g4, okay, goes knight h7. Now, that's a really passive move. That is a really passive move. How should we follow this up? Yes, so there's a couple of options. We can go d4, but also, just because a particular move isn't good in one position doesn't mean that it's not good in another. And this is a concept which I think you can take away from this game. When I mentioned that knight d5 is not as good as it appears, I think some of you may have, in your mind, might have just put a big red X over that move. I'm not going to consider knight d5. But the circumstances have changed, and now our primary motivation, primary goal, is to win back this f-pawn so that we can start attacking down the f-file. And in order to do that, knight d5 is the ideal move because it literally forks the bishop and the pawn. Now, d4 would have also been a perfectly good move. d4 would have given an advantage, but I think knight d5 is more forcing, and it's more aggressive. Bishop c5 check, and now, rather than just meekly dropping our king to h1, I'm not going to ask you guys. I know everybody sees it. We can play just d4 now. We have the best of all worlds. And this is, I mean, this is like the Vienna at its finest. Look at how crushing this position is. Look at how crushing this is. I mean, just, his pieces are shoved to the side of the board. Okay, so what should we do? First things first, we should decide whether to take the bishop or not. I wouldn't take the bishop. And the reason has nothing to do with anything specific. Well, it does. Let me rephrase that. The reason is that the bishop's not going anywhere. We don't have to do that yet. We can take the bishop on demand. So let's play the most flexible move. Let's play bishop takes f4. Let's do what needs to get done first, and then play the moves, the optional moves later, if that makes sense. So, okay, goes d6. So he's making reasonable moves, but I think we'll find a way to push him off the board in a second. So let's see. Yeah, I mean, obviously we have various sacrifices like bishop takes h6, but I don't think we've got enough there yet. I honestly don't think we've got quite enough there at the moment. Now, there's many different approaches to this position. Some of them are more complicated and intricate. Some of them are simpler. I want to make sort of a Russian school of chess move. And just me saying that already might guide some of you toward the correct move. Well, not the correct move, the move that I want to play. Now, what really bothers me about this situation, Joe, you're absolutely right, is the fact that he's exerting this pin over our king. And here's the funny thing. We can eliminate the pin by taking on b6. But it may very well be that I want to keep this knight alive in case it participates in some sort of combination with knight f6. So king h1 is perhaps not the best move. I'm sure the engine will laugh at me. But it's the sort of move that's very hard to play against because my opponent's sitting there saying, man, this guy doesn't give me any chances. He was maybe hoping for something related to the pin. You guys can see how like the right balance of aggressive chess and this kind of very, circumspect, mature moves like king h1, that can be totally deadly. Okay, so he plays d takes e5. Now what should we take with? And I think this is pretty intuitive. How can we resist the opportunity to take with the knight? Look at these snappers on e5 and d5. This just looks too nice. We could also play de, that's fine as well, but I like knight takes e5. Beautiful looking position. Okay, so this guy is good. He's not going down without a fight. Now, in such situations, you should be ready to transform your advantage several times. And what that means is that you might have pieces that are very well placed, right? And you don't want to part with them, but you have to. If you want to convert such positions against good defense, then you shouldn't get overly attached to any one particular piece. And if you just consider for a second the most obvious sequence of moves, what's the most natural sequence of moves, the one that we should begin by calculating? Because if it works, then it saves us a great deal of work. Well, first, we should begin by taking on b6. And then we should take a second to meditate on the possible candidate moves here. And if you do that, then you'll immediately find a very powerful candidate move after he plays a takes b6. We can simply take the bishop and then drop the queen to g4 with a huge attack. But I have a much better move in mind. Just strike and strike, d5, striking in the center, getting rid of the bishop. And the domination continues. We've got a huge attack, but now we got to be ready for some sort of tactics. Like, you just got to sense that look at how centralized our pieces are, look at how undeveloped he is. I mentioned this earlier when analyzing one of the viewer games. One of the ways, one of the tripwires for your intuition could be a situation in which you've got basically very well coordinated pieces, and a lot of them are aimed at your opponent's king, number one. And number two, your opponent's got very lackluster development or very passively developed pieces. That's a tactically fertile situation. You should start looking at sacrifices, captures, diagonals, anything that may act as, some sort of a tactical move. And here, we don't even need to reinvent the wheel. He puts his bishop in harm's way. You should immediately spot the x-ray. And the simplest move is just to take on h6. And we can, in the interest of time, we don't have to even really look for anything that much better than this. Even though maybe we could have played something like d6, but I don't see the need to get bogged down in the details. Okay. Bishop g6. Oh, man. Now, here, I can almost guarantee that most of you are probably thinking, let's take and go d6 check. But what do I always say when you've got a sequence of two moves? When you've got a sequence of two moves, what do you need to consider? What do you need to not forget to look at? Both ways. Check both ways. Check both move orders, because both might be good, but one might be, miles and miles more overwhelming than the other. And if you look at this for a second, if we play knight takes g6, okay, f takes g6, d6 check, he drops his king to h8, and somehow black is still kicking there. There's no obvious path to victory. But if we start with d6, we keep the bishop alive, we keep the knight alive, we're threatening to take on g6. We keep all of the benefits of the position without relinquishing anything. So very, clearly d6 is the better move order. This is a simple thing you guys can apply and just improve your tactical results very quickly. So here we obviously trade queens, and this culminates the variation. We trade queens, but that doesn't diminish the dominance. Now we take, and then we take on f7, and the game is over. Very simple, non-sacrificial sequence, just the way I like it. And this is the kind of tactical play that you got to master in order to be, then, start playing those super flashy sacrificial games. This is simple attacking play. If you have good command of this, then you'll be able to produce sort of more flashy combinations. But you can't have the second without mastering the first. Rook takes f7, of course. Not bishop takes f7 because it's a check. Rook takes f7 because we set up a devastating discovery against the king. Okay, so this is sort of a windmill. And in such positions, one of the most common mistakes that players make is that they get impatient with the discovered check. Remember that you're not forced to move the rook immediately. And unless there is clearly a good discovered check, one of the things that you should always consider in such situations, can we accumulate the pressure? Can we bring the final piece into the game in order to make the threat of a discovered check stronger? We absolutely can. Rook af1 is simple. And coincidentally, it creates a mate threat, which he misses. We now have checkmate in two moves. Who can spot it? Excellent. Rook f8 check, double check, check, check. And the rook on f1 crucially defends the rook on f8. He drops his king down, and of course, we can take the rook on a8, but much better move is rook 1 f7 mate. That was a very satisfying game, I have to say. Very satisfying. Okay, so king g7. Again, always look for a better move when you see a good one. Checkmate. The game is over. Very nice. So, conclusions from the game. So bishop b4. Again, I would encourage those of you who play the Vienna full time to actually look into this line with an engine. I don't really feel like doing that right now. But you feel free to do that on your own. We decided on the conventional move f4 anyway. All right, guys. So f4, e takes f4, knight f3. Again, do not automatically go d4 because of queen h4 check. And we have to move our king out. This is not the end of the world. People used to play like this in like the 1800s, but I think this is just a little bit too dubious. But if you look at Steinitz games, I mean, people played like this, and white is not losing by any stretch. I mean, knight f3 is coming. Thank you, Zinove, with the prime. So this is okay, but very, very dubious. Knight f3. h6, which is, which is pretty slow. And again, jumpy gifting to Forzax. Thank you. You have to learn to read your opponent's move. Like when you face a move that you might not be familiar with. Oh man, Simon. I'm sorry, that sucks. When you face a move that you may not be familiar with, you got to be calm and you got to ask yourself, well, let me put myself in my opponent's shoes. What do I think my opponent wants to do? And clearly, there's only one idea that h6 has, and that is to play g5. And as I explained, you have to be ready to be flexible. One of the problems with trying to memorize the theory of whatever opening you play is that you become too narrow-minded. You become tied into the idea that you play the same set of moves against everything. And I'll take this opportunity to crap on the London a little bit. It's the same problem if you play these systemic openings, that have a particular system of play. You become too accustomed to playing the same moves against everything, and you got to be careful about that. So, understanding that he wants to play g5 leads us to the next logical step, which is that, well, what's the drawback of h6? Oh, it doesn't develop any pieces. How do we exploit our opponent's lack of development? Well, we develop as fast as possible ourselves. I hope that makes sense. Bishop c4, knight f6. Now, again, if we had gone e5 immediately, I thought this was premature to do d5. You guys might look at this and say, wait a minute, we can win a piece. Let's give a check on b5 and then take the knight. But why does this not win a piece? T-page I'll get to in a second. Because of c6 counterattacking the bishop. This is pretty common. And see, the thing is, we can go like this. We can play fg and ef and fg. And I was thinking about this, but I didn't. The problem here, paradoxically, is that when we castle, he plays rook takes g7, and all of a sudden he's got this g-file pressure going. His king can seek shelter on f8. I honestly thought this was very unconvincing, but maybe this was the best way to play. I don't know. Anyways, we decided to castle. Now, T-page asks, what happens after bishop takes c3 and knight takes e4? What's up, Pranav? Who can tell me what happens here? This is sort of a very classic. There's many things that white can do to win the game. Yeah, I mean, the simplest is to start with rook e1. Black must play f5. And now who can follow up with a powerful attacking move here? There's many ways, I think, to win the game here with white. But there's one sort of very classic, just move that asks to be played. Queen d5, maybe queen f6. Although even here, I'm just playing bishop takes f4, you're winning. But see, when I look at the move f5, the first thing I always see is this diagonal getting weakened. I think you guys may be looking at the king directly, but I'm looking at that diagonal, and I'm immediately thinking of knight e5. Because this sets so many threats. I love moves that create more than one threat. So clearly, like queen h5 is the main threat, but you're also threatening to go knight f7, bishop f7 check is also a threat. Because, there's almost an insurance policy that comes with these moves. Because if one of the ideas is parried, then you'll always have some of the other ideas, if that makes sense. So if you're not sure, you're trying to choose between a sequence of moves, the move that carries the most ideas can often be the most dangerous one. It's a little bit of a vague piece of advice, but something hopefully that will help. So he castles, and now we play e5. So what's the difference? again, using the method of comparison, well, now his king is committed to the king side. His king is committed to the king side, which means that not only can the rook not like go to g8 as it could in the previous line, but our king is also safe. You know, we go d4, en passant, we can play bishop takes f4. Look at how bad his king is here. I mean, just the king is permanently in trouble, and I love these kinds of positions because we might be down a pawn, but white's compensation for the pawn is completely overwhelming. Rook 81 is coming, knight d5. Things are falling apart here on a grand scale for black. Okay, does that make sense? And by the way, if he goes knight g4 here, what would we have done? Yeah, I'll get to your question in a second, Tenebrity. I'm not sure which pawn you're referring to, honestly. Oh, rookie there. I'll get to you in a second. Yeah, h3. And again, bishop c5 check. We're winning an exchange. King h1, knight f2. No, you're not, because of the move d4. And very elegantly, this bishop on c1 covers the e3 square, so he doesn't have this intermediate move. He loses a piece. The knight has no other squares to escape to. Now, an excellent question being asked by Tenebrity. You've definitely earned a sub with that question. Hint, 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 wink, wink. I'm just kidding. I would never make anybody gift anybody else a sub. I am not that kind of toxic streamer. So d5, ef, dc, fg, rook e8. Nothing changes. We go d4. This is the umbrella method. You're basically using this pawn as an umbrella. But the issue is that the king is still tremendously weak here, so it doesn't really change the spirit of the position, if that makes sense. cd, bishop f4, still terrible for black. Does that make sense, Tenebrity? So this would be a good approach for black, but it doesn't solve the underlying problem that the king's pawn structure is totally ruined. Thank you, Tenebrity. Oh, he subs himself. 2 months. Damn, girl. I guess the explanation made sense. All right, so knight h7, knight d5, attacking everything. Bishop c5 throws oil onto the fire. He should have gone probably to a5 or to e7, but the position is still very rough. d4, bishop f4, and here, king h1. So does this move make sense to everybody? We're basically saying, okay, I'm annoyed by this pin. I want the d4 pawn to be able to move, should it be necessary. And it's almost a waiting move. You know, it's almost a move that tosses the ball back into his court. And this is a kind of move which a lot of players struggle to play when push comes to shove. But, you know, and I'm sure it's not the best move. I think a simpler approach would have been just to take the bishop straight away, and then, you know, you could even play e takes d6 if you wanted, although I don't see a reason to take that pawn. Maybe drop the bishop to d3, try to target the knight. Maybe queen d3 is another good move. So lots of good stuff here that you could do. Leonard, 3,500, thank you for the 3 months. So I wouldn't go too crazy and try to, I want to find like the most precise move. You're not a computer. That's part of the reason we play king h1, is I've come to terms with the fact that it's probably not the best move, but I know for a fact that it keeps all of the advantages of the position. In addition, if he would have gone bishop e6 here, after knight takes b6, a takes b6, this bishop is actually detrimental to his position because it allows now what move, which we basically played in the game. Well, no, we could have played it in the game, but d5, boom, boom, e6, just blasting through the gates here. And this seems pretty crushing to me. Okay, so d takes e5, knight takes e5, centralizing the other knight. Bishop b6, yeah, we did play it. Knight takes, a takes, and d5. Okay, so bishop f5 loses immediately after bishop takes h6. But what would have happened if he'd gone bishop c8? We have quite a pretty tactical sequence here. Very beautiful move, I think. Okay, beautiful, maybe overstating it. Now, like I said, guys, look at the preponderance of just pieces in the center versus, oh, 50 bucks from Infiltrator. I am way too dumb to contribute to your stream in a meaningful way, but you are probably the greatest chess educator of all time. I watch your YouTube content every day with my morning coffee. Pardon me for only spamming the chat while wasted on bourbon. 50 bucks from Infiltrator with an incredibly sweet message. As we say, I stand on the shoulders of giants and I stand on the shoulders of supporters. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Incredible level of support today. Thank you. So the move is knight takes f7. This is the sort of move that plays itself. Second only to Peter Giannatis, yeah, and John Bartholomew. Boom, boom, goodbye. I mean, this is game over. There are too many threats. There's DC, there's bishop f7. This bishop can also move. This is totally crushing. For example, CD takes bishop g4. Actually, wait a minute. No, here there's knight f6. So maybe we should be a little bit more careful. I guess we can throw in a check on d5 first and just basically checkmate the king. So bishop b6, there's b7 that's hanging. So one way or another, this is totally crushing. Or you could start by playing d6. That's also fine. But I like knight takes f7 quite a lot. Boom, boom, goodbye. So does this make sense? Does it make sense how knight takes f7 works here? And I haven't been specific for a reason because I want people's intuitions to suggest this move. This move can be arrived at virtually without too much calculation. As long as you see d6, you know that you're not even sacrificing that much material, okay? At most, you're sacrificing 2 pieces for a rook, and that's not even such a big investment. This is a no-brainer. Okay, and please don't be afraid to ask questions and say that, you know, you're not sure about this. I want to make sure. Yeah, what a pimps. I was thinking about this, so we could have. It's an alternative method. We could have taken and gone queen g4. We could have taken and gone queen g4. This also looks winning. I mean, we're threatening queen takes e6 check with mate. We're threatening bishop takes h6. The only thing that I found to be a little bit nasty here is the move queen to f6. This seems to walk into a discovery, but remember, if you move the bishop, he'll be able to take the rook. So that's the only thing I found to be a little bit annoying. Now, what if you had gone into this? Could somebody propose for me a good move for white here? And I'll give you guys a hint. It's a move in the same spirit as king h1. It's not the same type of move. It doesn't do the same thing. It's the same general spirit here, which we're trying to encapsulate. So back to this position. So there's a couple of moves that I like, and you guys are naming both of them. This is amazing. The first one is rook f3. You're just lifting the rook, but you're not trying to lift the rook to g3. Primarily, you're trying to put the rook and establish it on a defended square, so that then you can move the bishop wherever you want to move it. The second move that you could play is h3, which solves the problem of this move being a back rank mate. So for example, if you drop the bishop back now, and he goes for this position, the king is very safe on h2, and the queen is totally dominant here. Black technically has enough material, but, I mean, you guys should be able to see how discombobulated black's pieces are. So I love the fact that people are suggesting both moves. Shows me that everybody's paying attention. Great to see. Bishop takes h6 in the game, and bishop g6, d6 is just game over. Probably the most resilient would be to play queen f6 here. And white has a gazillion winning moves. We could even drop the bishop back to f4 and keep the extra pawn and then, you know, go queen h5 and stuff. Doesn't really matter. The reason he didn't take the bishop is because then we take his bishop and look at how bad his king is. Then we go d6, you know, a la how we played it in the game. Well, queen f6, the only reason I'm saying is because if he moves the bishop away, then f7 is dead meat. We can play d6. So he has to keep the bishop on f5 at all costs. Still 2 primes to be matched, says Jumpy, the ever-generous Jumpy Dev. Vishen11 asks, after knight takes f7, what if he takes with the king and not the rook? You tell me, Vishen, I want you to answer the question. What do you think white is going to do here? What do you think white should do here? Look at the king very carefully. Look at all of the sources of possible attacking moves. The simplest is not to play d6, although d6 is crushing. The simplest is to play bishop takes c7 check. Bishop g5, Simon, I fell into the same thing. Amazingly, black has knight f6 covering the discovery. So bishop c7 is actually important here. Remember this trick, by the way. This is an important trick. This idea of covering the discovery all of a sudden with a knight. Knights are pretty good at this kind of stuff. Okay. Another question. After bishop takes h6, what about the desperado bishop takes c2? All right. Daniel, Mrs. Riley, and only Mrs. Riley. How many fingers am I holding up? Daniel Berezhnov, what do you think white's best move here is? So there's a couple of moves. There's queen g4, Joe pointing it out. That would be crushing. But if you want to keep it simple, take the bishop Take, boom, the game. I mean, look at this. The game is completely over. So remember, pawns are not important anymore. This is all about checkmate. You don't really care if your opponent takes a couple of extra pawns, right? And I think one of the key takeaways of the speedrun in an attacking sense in this level is that a lot of players, and I see this particularly now, and there's nothing wrong with this, they watch, me on Twitch, Hikaru and stuff, and, you come in and I want to, mess some people up, I want to sack some pieces, but, you have to climb the staircase, and to climb the staircase, you need to master the art of simple attacking. No sacrifices, no BS. You have to master the mechanics of what makes an attack successful, patient moves, preparing slowly, attacking fast, spotting the tactic when it presents itself. If you get better at that, then you will start finding that, these sacrifices, which at some point don't work, all of a sudden they start to work because you're supporting them with good fundamentals. Thank you, POC64, for the tier 1. All right. So, if anything is to come out of this, if you want to play my style of chess, and also if you look at my classical games, who is this guy? I'm just curious. This is Kriari's another handle. If you look at my classical games, I'm not going crazy every game, right? It's all about getting the fundamentals down, and that's one of the things that some people are not doing. They're going straight to the let's get crazy and sacrifice part. Sorry to keep repeating that, but I think it's important. So no, I'm not. I'm very tough. I am not a positional player by any stretch of the imagination. Thank you, Lewis Hamilton, gifting to Kappa Kid. But sometimes there are times to play solid chess. And exactly, Simon. Exactly. Why shouldn't we feed our instant gratification? So rook f7 is crushing. But I think I'm gonna be back tomorrow, guys, and we're gonna do more speedrunning. So